save her. This is the ultimate goal of Shovel Knight, to save Shield Knight, the person he cares for the most. No matter the obstacles that come his way, be they fearsome foes or a staggering number of knightly feats, there is always the underlying motivation, the steady beat that drums at the heart of this rock-solid 2D platformer. Save her. But doing so is only a part of what makes Shovel Knight memorable. Making it from one end of the stage to the next, beating the final boss, finding every collectible, and even completing every challenge in the game is just a fraction of what makes this series special. Shovel Knight, the DLC campaigns that followed, and even the people behind the game have come to mean something to me. Completing Shovel Knight over the years has turned into something of a ritual for me. Without any irony, this is the game that helped me look at life a lot differently. Yacht Club Games have developed a series that celebrates the past and looks forward to the future, and has helped me do the same. Hey everyone, and welcome to the penultimate episode of the Completionist New Game Plus, the show where I am recompleting the first 120 episodes in the original Completionist lineup. It's hard to believe that we are nearing this finish line after 5 long years. Thank you to everyone who's joined us on this incredible journey. In my other New Game Plus videos, I take the original game and reassess what feels like to recomplete it again. For this video, I never stopped playing. In my original Shovel Knight episode, I told the world to completely complete this game. Obviously, you know where I stand when it comes to Shovel Knight, and I am biased. I admit it. Hell, I played Shovel Knight in a commercial, and I even brought my own costume to the shoot. This game has meant the world to me, so much so that I truly believe that this game saved my life, just like Shovel Knight saves Shield Knight. With all that said, I think every part of the Shovel Knight Treasure Trove is worth savoring. It's worth noting that at the time of the original video, only Shovel Knight, Shovel of Hope was out. Since then, 4 more entire games have been added to the collection, which of course, I've completed today. But I didn't just complete it on one platform. I did so on Nintendo Switch, the Xbox Series X/S or Xbox One in this case, and the PlayStation 4/5. Shovel Knight saved me, and now I want to celebrate every part of it. So, to that, and to everyone at home, it's time for some chivalry.
And the battle continues! This could turn it all around! This bout will determine who is the strongest once and for all!
Alright, I know you're looking at the runtime of this episode and thinking to yourself, Gerard, you were crazy. And the correct answer is yes, I am. So with that said, come along with me on this long-ass journey. Let's take a trip back in time. It was the Penny Arcade Expo year 2013. I was at the Kickstarter party for Mighty No. 9, hosted by my friend Jesse Cox. I was at this event to find and meet one person, a chiptune musician who went by the name of Vert. Now, I've been following Vert for many years, and really wanted to get to know the man behind the music, Jake Kaufman. Little did I know that my scheme to meet Jake would blossom into a real friendship, but not just with him, the company that he was working with, Yacht Club Games, the developers behind what would become one of the most famous indie games of all time. Talking to Jake at the launch party, he idly revealed that he was working on the score for a new title that seemed pretty cool. That title was Shovel Knight, and from that night onward, my future was changed. I'm preaching to the choir here, but Shovel Knight is, for me, a perfect game. It takes everything I love about classic design philosophy and melds it with modern sensibilities. The result is smart and joyous. Don't take my word for it. Listen to what the Nintendo eShop has to say.
Yacht Club Games' beautifully authentic style bridges the gap between yesterday and today. Design, art, and audio harken back to the days of 8-bit.
Shovel Knight was initially pitched on Kickstarter as simply a groundbreaking love letter to 8-bits. It eventually met its funding, then obliterated its stretch goals as more and more people invested in its future. Yacht Club Games could have stopped right there with a wild crowdfunding success, but they ran into a bit of a problem. The game, or rather the promise of the game, exceeded all funding expectations. Yacht Club quickly realized that their stretch goals, including making boss characters playable, adding a multiplayer mode, and making ports of the game for every available platform of the time, would take much more effort and time than they initially thought. Okay, so this happens all the time on Kickstarter. Everyone who has ever crowdfunded a game knows the risks. They know that an indie development team may vastly underestimate what they can accomplish in the moment. But instead of backing down from their lofty goals, Yacht Club Games leaned in. To some fans, it may have seemed as though their stretch goals were overpromising, but that small team over-delivered. They met the challenge with candidness and a solemn commitment to get things done. Over about 7 years, Yacht Club Games gifted the world with not only Shovel Knight, but 4 other whole-ass games, and even developed full-length spin-offs and stepped into the publishing sphere in the meantime. Not only is Shovel Knight an incredible piece of game design that I genuinely think should be mentioned in the same breath as Mario or Sonic, the entire Shovel Knight Treasure Trove has become one of the best value packages in games, hands down. People sometimes make the mistake of thinking that the DLC campaigns aren't full-on Shovel Knight games, but they absolutely are, and each one adds meaningfully to the universe that Yacht Club has built. If you're a fan of retro-inspired experiences and somehow have not yet played any of the Shovel Knight games, what are you doing, man? Come on, let's go. The entire package feels timeless, and to me, it's because Treasure Trove is cohesive, starting with its jaw-dropping visual throwback designs. It all begins with the main character, Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight has an instantly iconic silhouette. He's memorable, and it's easy to see why an entire game was built around him. There's something about pixel art that ages extraordinarily well in my eyes. In every part of Treasure Trove, the pixel aesthetic is pushed to its absolute limits. Characters and enemies are very easy to read, and every level feels distinct and memorable. Yacht Club Games have pulled off a magic trick with animations that are genuinely beautiful and backgrounds that have flawless scrolling with multiple layers. The design work that went into animating Shovel Knight is astounding, and a testament to the work and prowess of the entire team. Lead animator Nick Wozniak, aka Woz, aka the hot sauce fiend with the iron stomach, aka that man who bribed me to review Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon a while ago, pointed out in a Reddit AMA that we stayed true to the original color palette as much as possible. The color palette really helps the game feel NES without having to be beholden to the restrictions of NES hardware. This is the balance the devs had to strike constantly, staying true to the feeling of the classics, but incorporating modern design. The visuals spark joy, and so does the audio design. The soundtrack is insane from start to finish. The original game even features 2 tracks from Manami Matsume, the original composer of Mega Man. A Japanese group called Koopa Soundworks saw the Shovel Knight Kickstarter and reached out offering to connect the team with Matsume. Shovel Knight marks her first time working on a Western game, but the bulk of the music is composed by stone cold genius Jake Kaufman. I have been following Jake's work on Overclock Remix for years, where I only knew him as Vert. Little did I know that Shovel Knight's soundtrack would become one of the most prominent pieces of music in my life. The entire Shovel Knight saga has served as a window to the future for me in many respects. Getting to know Jake over the years even led to the creation of my boy band Big Bad Bosses, with Jake serving as the composer, musician, and writer of the first album. Visual and audio presentation obviously is important, but it's the whole shebang that matters. That includes mechanics, and yes, story. Shovel Knight has a deeply emotional core. Across all 4 main games, Shovel Knight Showdown, and even Pocket Dungeon and Dig, await fantastic stories to be told. Full of humor and heart, the entire Shovel Knight world has grown to feel personally meaningful. In an interview with Jonathan Holmes from the magazine A Profound Waste of Time, co-founder Sean Velasco said, "We didn't set out to make Shovel Knight a really profound experience, but we did want people to think about the story. We wanted them to think about it the next day after they've played it. And here's the thing, I'm still thinking about it years later. In just a handful of screens with minimal dialogue boxes, the developers created characters that are well-defined and larger than life, but still have themes that are strong and resonate. I have loved Shovel Knight for almost a decade. I loved it so much that it became a comfort game for me. I completed the original Shovel Knight 22 times in the summer it released in preparation for my original video. The completion process is always amazingly satisfying to me, and I developed a relationship with the game itself. Over the course of months and then years from the release of my first video, I would come to know the ins and outs of every version of the game. Incredibly, Yacht Club Games has just kept giving. If you picked up the base version or were a Kickstarter backer at a certain tier from way back then, the Treasure Trove has only blossomed. I bought this game almost a decade ago. It has only grown in value since. Every single game, no matter the platform, teaches the players to appreciate the satisfaction in overcoming the seemingly impossible. So what is Treasure Trove? Treasure Trove has 4 full campaigns. The original, now retitled Shovel Knight, Shovel of Hope, Plague Knight, Plague of Shadows, Specter Knight, the Specter of Torment, and King Knight, the King of Cards featuring Joustus. Also in the mix is Shovel Knight Showdown, a multiplayer platform brawler featuring most members of the cast that functions as its own separate title. All of these have similarities in terms of completion requirements, but each demand their own special spotlight. Across the board, there is a core set of design principles. Each game is perfectly scoped, scaling in difficulty and complexity the longer they go on. Gameplay is always taught organically, in a way that feels natural, exciting, and empowering. Every level has a good balance of platforming, exploration, and combat. Most impressive of all is that each game has its own theme, from music to art direction to items and collectibles to the literal shape of each level, to reinforce the overall structure of the entire Treasure Trove. Here's the eShop once again. The systems of today also give Shovel Knight modern touches. Detailed animation, multi-layered parallax backgrounds, and evolved game design. And that's some pretty good copy. Yo, who wrote that? Yo, Waz, did you write that?
No.
For this video, I set out to complete the most comprehensive versions of the Shovel Knight Treasure Trove on every major platform. So not only have I completed everything on the Wii U and 3DS originally, I have since completed Treasure Trove on the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox. Because that's how much Shovel Knight and Yacht Club have meant to me over the years. A little obsessive? Yes. Somewhat crazy? A hard yes. Worth it? 100%. Now I'm going to make an effort to speak to all elements of what makes Shovel Knight memorable and enjoyable to complete. But I cannot talk about this game without getting a little real. Gerard, can you just focus on completing the games? Hey, fictional person, I will. Just bear with me for just a moment. I have talked about Shovel Knight many times on this show. It was even my game of the decade for a top 10 video I made back in 2020. Maybe you've caught me streaming it or tuned into one of my many charity events and saw me and various members of Yacht Club Games eating something gross as we played the Treasure Trove or Pocket Dungeon or Dig. Shovel Knight has had an outsized impact on me as a person. I started playing it right around the time I really needed it most, and I didn't even know that I needed it. My original video on Shovel Knight was released smack in the middle of me dealing with grief from every angle. I was also in a creative rut after pushing myself to the brink for 100 episodes over just a couple of years. I was in physical distress as I had basically been breaking my body for months on end at that point with no real meaningful rest. Adding to my stress, several personal relationships in my life were in not so great shape. And on top of everything else, there was the weight of my mom passing that colored all aspects of my life. See, for 15 years, I had taken care of my mom with my family. Every single day of my life, it was waking up early in the morning, taking care of mom, bathing her, feeding her, going to school, being responsible, coming home, continuing that process with my friends and family at my side. 15 years later, suddenly she was gone, and I didn't know how to exist anymore outside of being the completionist. I was in my mid-20s and kept myself so focused on work and pushing forward that grieving never really felt like an option. I'm not proud of it. I used work as a way to avoid having to sit with things that needed time to heal. If you ever dealt with something like this, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. Part of me felt as if the more effort I put into my work, the more someone, my family, strangers on the internet, whoever, would appreciate me for who I am. That if I was able to work so hard on something, I could somehow save my mom and my relationship with her. And maybe a part of myself that, subconsciously or otherwise, was dying. I know that's some heavy stuff, but thank you for being here. But in the midst of all this turmoil that I didn't want to tell anyone about, came this little retro platformer. Like a hand from the sky, this game reached down to lift me up. I latched onto Shovel Knight. I became so obsessed with completing it that my original video was just the beginning. Yes, the story and concept of saving things resonated with me, and it still does. Seriously, the story of Shovel Knight is fundamentally about a guy grieving the loss of the most important person in his life and finding the strength to go on despite this. In just a few short panels, there is a lot communicated about the nature of the main characters. One of my favorite things about the entire Shovel Knight saga is its effectiveness in storytelling. This is so much more than a hero saves the princess storyline. It has only deepened over the years as the Treasure Trove was developed, and even further fleshed out in both Shovel Knight Dig and Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon. Yet at the end of the day, whether the story resonates or not, I couldn't stop playing this game because of how good it feels. Shovel Knight takes commonplace concepts like the hero's journey or 2D action platforming and makes them feel exciting again. Everything about playing it feels sharpened to a fine point. It is meticulously crafted and eventually nudges you towards scaling the mountain of completion. If you've ever heard anything about Shovel Knight, you probably know the bullet points that everyone and their mother has reported about. It draws inspirations from all kinds of NES classics, Mega Man and its level design and boss encounters, Super Mario Bros. 3 with its map and random roaming enemies, even Castlevania with its sub-weapons. Classic Nintendo design philosophy will always be influential, but Yacht Club went an extra step further. Shovel Knight not only references the classics, it is one, a fully formed old school game that feels refreshingly modern. Yacht Club innovates across every game in the Treasure Trove. As a 2D platformer, Shovel Knight is exceptional because it nails the fundamentals of movement and action, and then pushes the limits of what players have come to expect. Shovel Knight has a moveset that makes sense for his character that is taught to the player organically. The devs took a huge leaf out of Capcom's design book. Even the amount of rooms in a given Shovel Knight level can be directly compared to Mega Man. Because the developers have a strong grasp of what makes classic games feel good to play, they're able to iterate on those ideas with amazing results. Okay, so in classic Mega Man games, players frequently encounter new enemy types and obstacles, but the visual language gives them time to understand how to attack or avoid damage. Characters enter screens at specific points, and with a glance, players can determine how to proceed. Shovel Knight's developers internalized this philosophy. The game teaches you how to play through action. The trick is to present the player with limited options that show how mechanics work in isolation, and then expand those concepts later. The character's movement speed and jump arc are extremely specific. Once the player understands the signature shovel drop, they are ready for anything, including dozens of challenges and feats. Even if you think you're bad at platformers or don't have any nostalgia for games from the 80s and 90s. Shoutouts to my Gen Z viewers who remind me that I'm growing older all the time. There is a ton to love about Shovel Knight. Pulling off the shovel drop and bouncing on enemies multiple times always feels good. And you do this move probably thousands of times in a single run, even if you're not a completionist. It's a simple 2-button combo, jumping and pressing down, but landing those hits feels crispy. The shovel drop was inspired more by Zelda 2 than DuckTales, but regardless, it always is good. And that's just one move. All 12 relics in this game feel useful, and earning their associated feats teaches the player something cool. You might do a playthrough never once using the Chaos Orb, but once you learn how unstoppable it can be, it's super fun to use. There's a vast level of expression available to the player, and the unique ways to experience this game don't stop with the items. Shovel Knight was built with non-linearity in mind. Between levels, you can visit towns and other locations to upgrade your character and chat with NPCs, in the off chance that a regular stage is giving you some trouble. And at every turn, Shovel Knight is absolutely bursting at the seams with personality. The game is incredibly funny, packed with visual gags, humorous character designs, and sharp, witty writing. It is also deeply heartfelt throughout, featuring a touching story about holding on to those you love and relying on your friends in times of need. The entire experience is thrilling, and the world feels fully fleshed out, worth revisiting over and over, time and time again for completionists. Animations are unbelievably expressive, especially given the main character never even shows their face. Watching the bard jump up and down receiving a new music sheet is super cute, and I'll never forget the first time I danced with the Troupple King. This weird world full of knights, animal people, magic, and wandering adventurers is fully thought out. Even after completing this game so many times, I always find something new to appreciate. A fun Easter egg in the background, or the way an NPC is animated. I know that pixelated 2D style indie games might feel like a oversaturated market today, hell, even back in 2014. But Shovel Knight's world stands out as more than just a nostalgia bait. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and wears its heart on its blue armored sleeves. All that to say is that it's a good thing, both for you, the viewer, and me, the completionist, that there is way more to complete this time around. The original release is completely packed full of content, but the 3 more modern versions of the game I completed for this video have much more on the line. I still find completing the original Shovel Knight campaign to be just as satisfying as ever. It is a modern game in every sense of the word, but somehow feels transported from the past. It made me feel like an excited kid again the first time I played it, but with the knowledge of someone who's had 30 years of experience forming opinions about games. Shovel Knight managed to dig up inspiration from the past to create something new for the future. As far as actually completing the game goes, it's a straightforward but deeply rich experience. Full completion requires a minimum of 3 playthroughs due to various feats, depending on your skill. But that's not all. Upon beating the game once, you unlock challenge mode, which was not present for my first video. And because I'm playing Treasure Trove across all different consoles, I'll have to contend with the version differences, as Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox each have their own special content to complete in Shovel of Hope. Shovel of Hope's campaign takes place across 8 distinct levels with bonus areas and other locations sprinkled in between. All roads eventually lead to the Enchantress, and a crazy boss rush where Shovel Knight must overcome every member of the Order of No Quarter in a single fight. I still adore every boss fight and finding every secret. Overcoming feats is now something I can do in my sleep. And hey, if you want a blast from the past, take a look at my completion bonus episode where I detailed how to earn all 45 feats in this campaign. It's funny going back to that video today because some of the techniques I used are outdated and have been patched out. But for the most part, I still think it's a solid guide. Every version of Shovel of Hope has something unique to complete. On the Switch, Amiibo support adds a surprising amount of content. This is actually the first independent game to use Amiibo functionality, and the Shovel Knight Amiibo is the first Amiibo modeled after an indie character. In-game, Madame Meebar can summon fairy companions for the player, but the big draw for Amiibos are the additional co-op challenges. There have been Amiibos made for Shovel Knight, Plague Knight, Specter Knight, and King Knight. There's even a gold Shovel Knight one as well, and each one unlocks a new challenge mode. Playing Shovel of Hope on Xbox lets players fight the Battletoads. Yes, you heard me, the Battletoads. I love this crossover. And there was even new music composed for this side quest as well. You have to fight all 3 Battletoads in different ways, and it's awesome seeing how these iconic characters translate into this specific style. Rare was apparently super down to put these characters in Shovel Knight to help the game stand out for its Xbox release. The fight feels true to the Battletoads and even brings back the Turbo Tunnel, which is almost enough to trigger myself. The best part about putting the Battletoads in Shovel Knight was that it happened in 2015, 5 years before the series was rebooted by Delilah Studios. So Battletoads appearing in Shovel Knight was their first appearance in over 2 decades. Once you've beaten the Battletoads, you will get access to the special Battletoads armor. Now, the PlayStation version also features an additional side quest with an iconic character. Only, it's not the Battletoads, it's Kratos. That's right, the God of War is here in a secret boss fight that rewards you with crazy, powerful gear. Honestly, it's the best gear in the game. I love this gear. It is phenomenal. It is still a shock to see 2 of my favorite characters in gaming battling each other for supremacy. Cory Barlog himself has even stated that Kratos' appearance in Shovel of Hope is canon, something he probably experienced on his way to Midgard, though take that with a grain of salt. Completing Shovel Knight is wildly satisfying. This game rewards patience and mastery, and once you've got all that down, you can rip through it with ease. In fact, I said that in my original video, this game just screams out to speedrunners to play. And I can't say that I'm starting to dip my toe into the speedrunning community when it comes to this game. I love it so much, I'm still finding new ways to enjoy it, almost 10 years later. And I want to share that joy with the world. That's about the highest compliment that I can give a game. At this point, I've lost track of how many times I have completed this game. To me, it's perfect, and it's an always satisfying completion experience through and through. Shovel Knight has come to mean so much to me that during IndieLand 2022, obviously the annual indie event that I showcase every year raising money in honor of my mom, I set a goal where if we hit it, I would get an ephemeral tattoo of our boy. We smashed that goal, and I've had a Shovel Knight tattoo on my forearm ever since for the last several months. Completing every version of Treasure Trove on as many platforms as possible is just another way of showing my love for this franchise and this company. That's 45 feats 3 times. I think the addition of the challenges and the new content from the Xbox and PlayStation versions are excellent, even if I find the main game to still be short. However, this game in my eyes cannot be more perfect, with the exception of more content. I want more. I want more. I'm hungry for more Shovel Knight. Lo and behold, they went ahead and developed more content. Plague of Shadows was the 2015 follow-up to the original Shovel Knight campaign. It is not a straightforward sequel. It is in fact a side story taking place concurrently with Shovel of Hope, starring a character who moves and acts completely different from Shovel Knight. The stages in Plague Knight's campaign may be familiar, but his movement and attacks are completely unique. I played a lot of 2D platformers and still came away feeling impressed after completing Plague of Shadows. There's a zany madcap attitude suffused through this campaign that perfectly matches the maniacal alchemist. That is, until things take a more romantic turn in a few stages. Yakla blends comedy and pathos in Plague of Shadows, which is basically the romance of the Shovel Knight universe. I called Plague of Shadows a side story to the Shovel of Hope campaign, but it is truly a parallel plot. As Shovel Knight fights his way through the Order of No Quarter to save Shield Knight, Plague Knight embarks on a journey of his own. The shy little guy wants to create a potion of ultimate power, and the only way to gather ingredients is to take them from the unsuspecting Order of No Quarter after defeating them in battle. It is hilarious to come across knights you already know and to see them react with confusion to Plague Knight. And there are additional layers to uncover here. Yeah, you're exploring your way through the same worlds and stages you did as Shovel Knight, but there are more objectives than simply beating the bosses. There are dozens of collectibles, from 41 scrap sheets to 6 cloaks, 420 cipher coins, and an entirely new list of 20 feats to conquer. Plague Knight is a devious trickster, and the feats and 26 challenges in this campaign emphasize that. Plague of Shadows is a campaign filled with subtleties. Shovel of Hope's levels were designed around Shovel Knight's moveset and his hero's journey. Plague of Shadows inverts that. Plague Knight can't even go into town because of his status as a villain, so he's got to create a secret lair as a hub. Within Plague of Shadows, you really have to get into the mindset of a mad scientist to fully complete the game. The developers wanted players to feel as though they were stepping into the daily life of an alchemist. Plague Knight's entire moveset requires significant trial and error to master, and completing feats rewards that mastery. Part of the joy of playing as Plague Knight is learning something completely new. Shovel Knight has straightforward movement. He jumps, he slashes, he shovel drops. Plague Knight uses the power of alchemy to burst jump and pelt enemies with bombs. Almost every aspect of his attack and jump can be customized, meaning there's a surprising amount of player expression. Bombs have 3 aspects to mess with: powder, casing, and fuses. Powder influences how the explosion looks and behaves, and affects how many bombs you can toss at once. Casings control how bombs are thrown, whether they bounce or float or whirl around you, and changing the fuse affects the timing of explosions. You can also change the standard bomb burst, which greatly affects Plague Knight's movements and how he bounces across the screen. First-time players of this campaign will love the float burst, which gives you a parachute-style landing every time. More experienced players can do all kinds of tricks with bomb bursts, and completionists will have to master almost every aspect to get the most bang for their buck. One of the really amazing things about this campaign is how good it feels to adapt on the fly to try out new techniques. It is chaotic, but I really felt like an inventor coming up with new combinations in real time. Every single bomb toss, double jump, and explosion is exquisitely animated, which makes experimentation feel even more satisfying. Plague Knight moves quickly and fluidly once you can adjust to the learning curve. But that's the thing, there is a learning curve, and you have to remind yourself that as you experience the game. The devs still managed to retain the core idea of NES-style design. At first, moving and jumping in Plague of Shadows reminded me of picking up an NES game I had never played without reading the manual first. Even figuring out how to traverse the planes of passage took time to figure out. I died a lot in my first few runs. The environment is the same as Shovel of Hope, but navigating it feels completely new. Plague Knight even has 9 relics to collect called Arcana. He can fish using bait bombs or get extra platforming help with the vat. Arcana is essential for beating side stages and overcoming other challenges. There are less of them to master than Shovel Knight's relics, but learning their quirks is just as enjoyable. In the DLC campaigns, Yacht Club wanted to maintain the feeling that each of these characters would have movesets that reflected their boss battles. Plague Knight's moveset and abilities successfully translate a short boss fight into the base for an entire game. All of this madcap movement and player expression is in service of the main story that is surprisingly sweet. Sure, Plague Knight is doing his best to go behind everyone's back in service of his own ambitions, but he's doing it for love. That makes it fine, right? If you're killing yourself for love, everyone gives you a pass. Those are the rules. Nothing bad can happen when you push yourself as hard as you can because you're trying to do something noble. Your relationships definitely won't suffer when you put all of your focus on trying to achieve greatness at the expense of everyone you love. And okay, maybe I've internalized the underlying themes more than I thought. There was definitely a time where I thought if I worked hard enough and long enough, I could save everyone around me. One of the running themes in every Treasure Trove storyline is the power of relationships. The heart of Plague of Shadows is the relationship between Plague Knight and Mona. These two have a bond that is different than that of Shield Knight and Shovel Knight, but it's just as strong. Mona and Plague Knight clearly have romantic feelings for each other, but don't know how to make their love known. Every one of their conversations has a little bit of flirty twing to it. This tension, if you will. It's by no means a perfect relationship, which is why I think it lands so well. Even in this world of fantasy and magic, Plague Knight is still awkward and uncomfortable and, for the sake of one specific feat, kind of creepy. Rather than face off against a corrupted version of Shield Knight, Plague Knight's final battle pits him against a mirror version of his darkest, power-hungry self. It's another example of how the themes of the game are reflected in boss fights and gameplay. There's also a secret way to beat one of the final boss forms. Don't do anything. If you go into this fight and don't press a single button for a minute or so, Plague Knight will eventually end things on his own terms in comedic fashion. I don't think I would call it a completion bonus necessarily, but watching Plague Knight and Mona dance together after the end credits is one of the most satisfying parts of the entire Treasure Trove. Yacht Club Games has an inside joke about loving useless buttons, such as pressing down on the D-pad when the player's grounded. But in Plague of Shadows, once Plague Knight learns how to dance from the Trapple King himself, if you hold down, he'll practice a little baby waltz. That is, unless you try to do so in front of Mona. Plague Knight is too shy to dance in front of her, until the very end credits, when he finally has the confidence in himself and the courage to dance his heart's dance. It's extremely cute and oddly rewarding. This post-credits dance marks how these two characters are each other's person, that they have found each other and accepted the other's flaws and quirks. Plague Knight and Mona dancing together as a blue fire burns in the background is like a pixel art version of Fight Club that never got made. It's a fine ending, though it does take a few more playthroughs to fully complete it. My journey of appreciation for Plague of Shadows is a long one. At first, I had an extreme negative reaction to the chaotic movement and unusual powers of the character. But I've grown to appreciate the game's subtleties over the years as I've completed it. I love how the collectible cipher coins are basically real-time difficulty modifiers. If you see a cipher coin, it indicates a new area that was not in Shovel of Hope, or one that may require more skill to reach. Players can choose to replay the level and come back later once they have additional movement options and maybe more relics, or spend time trying to collect them immediately. After completing Plague of Shadows several times across multiple systems, I now find it a fairly painless experience. What once was impossible to understand is suddenly easy to read as 2 + 2 = 4. Solving Plague of Shadows also helped me think about how to conquer the rest of the Treasure Trove. In every campaign, there's always a speed run. There's always a feat associated with gathering a ton of money without spending it. And there's always a no upgrade playthrough. Even though each character controls so differently, it's still the same DNA. To me, Plague of Shadows is a story about appreciating what is directly in front of you. At the end of the adventure, Plague Knight acknowledges and realizes that he is enough. He is worthy of love, flaws and all, even without a potion of ultimate power. The feats and character-associated challenges always sound daunting, but I encourage you to go for it. Be like Plague Knight. Work up the courage to do the impossible. He may be short, but he's a king, because he took a risk and did something difficult. How do you address a lingering ghost of grief that colors every aspect of your life? Do you talk about it constantly in the hopes that it becomes less painful? Do you keep it to yourself, deciding to deal with the pain on your own terms? Or do you externalize it, channeling your grief into action with the goal of trying to help others? Specter Knight and the Specter of Torment poses these questions in a dramatic style that might feel out of pocket for Shovel Knight. But rather than punch above its weight, Specter of Torment delivers with a compact, moving story about ambition, tragedy, and loyalty. This surprisingly moving prequel to Shovel of Hope stars everyone's favorite tortured scythe-wielding bad boy, Specter Knight. It's a drama, but it also puts the rule of cool at the forefront of everything. The plot takes itself very seriously, but still has room for humor in very unexpected places. It is by far the easiest of the Treasure Trove campaigns to complete, and quite honestly, it might be my favorite, but also serves as an epic remix to the core Shovel Knight formula in terms of movement and gameplay. Structurally speaking, Specter of Torment is the most non-linear in the entire Treasure Trove. Instead of exploring a world map to reach different stages, Specter Knight can use a magic mirror inside the Tower of Fate to choose which stage to visit. You can feel the Mega Man legacy with the way Specter of Torment lays out its level select screen. Stages still have bosses to defeat, and the wandering travelers occasionally visit Specter at the tower, but the structure of this campaign is very hub and spoke. Right away, this poses a design challenge. How does one account for difficulty scaling when the player can go anywhere they want whenever they please? Yacht Club managed to craft a campaign where all 9 levels feel approachable, but have a satisfying challenge factor. This game is a tremendous showcase for how far Yacht Club is able to push the core principles of Shovel Knight. Specter of Torment takes the idea of building a moveset around a boss fight and tweaks it to be more player appropriate. As it is a prequel, Specter's movement and abilities are different from how they appear when you battle him in previous campaigns. The team wanted the entire game to have a tragic but awesome feel, and they perfectly encapsulate that notion. Specter Knight essentially is a ghost ninja, and his movement and animations reflect that. There are a few obvious differences from previously played characters. Instead of a shovel or bomb, Specter Knight carries a huge Grim Reaper scythe to slash enemies. But he can also grind on rails like he's Sonic the Hedgehog or playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater, which leads to some absolutely thrilling moments. Instead of the shovel drop, Specter Knight has a context-sensitive dash slash, which can propel him diagonally upwards or downwards depending on the angle of the attack. Specter also has sticky feet, which helps him wall jump and climb up, completely changing how platforming works. The art direction and chiptune heavy soundtrack are still heavily reminiscent of classic Nintendo titles, but Specter of Torment also draws from some popular 3D action games like Ninja Gaiden Black and Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, with the way Specter can essentially lock onto enemies and climb walls. The idea of taking slick moves from 3D action games and reinterpreting them in a signature Shovel Knight style is kind of groundbreaking, and the end result is sharply streamlined. As I spent more time completing each of these campaigns, I grew more and more impressed at the willingness Yacht Club went to break the norms they themselves had established. This is their 3rd campaign, and it is a huge shakeup. Growing older, I understand the importance of working on things that you are passionate about, and how hard it is to maintain that passion over time. It's partly why I make an effort to change the format of my own show every 100 episodes or so. The amazing thing about Yacht Club is that they have shown a willingness to scrap ideas that aren't working, and to start from scratch when necessary. Specter of Torment reflects this passion through and through. During development, the team wanted Specter to feel as cool as possible, so everything that didn't line up with that idea was just tweaked until it did line up. Design obstacles were filtered through the idea of how do we make this look and feel awesome whenever possible, and the results are pretty crystal clear. Specter Knight looks and feels awesome all the time. Having a strong directive from the start means that everything else will eventually fall into place if you stick to your guns. Specter's mobility is guided by his design, which influenced how levels were built out, which in turn affected how collectibles and other abilities were implemented. It's inspiring to me that Yacht Club could churn out a game that is still in the same universe, but feels so radically different from Shovel of Hope and Plague of Shadows. Yacht Club took the opportunity to majorly refresh everything and built out whole new levels. They even had to consider things like the width of gaps and the heights of blocks. For this campaign, Yacht Club managed to adhere to their core principles even as they built a new foundation. The same focus on teaching gameplay organically is still here, and the results are incredible. Specter Knight's mechanics are tight. This is the campaign that changes things up by introducing more buttons into the mix. Instead of being a 2-button game, Specter Knight has a bit more for players to manage. This is definitely a blow to those who prefer the Spartan control schemes of the previous 2 campaigns. But with results that feel this silky smooth, it's hard to argue with. Specter Knight collects and uses his 11 Kuros differently than Shovel Knight and the Relics. He's got a darkness meter that depletes with the use of every curio, but also has the unique ability to earn darkness from enemies. This encourages the player to use curioses as often as possible. Players can unlock them by visiting Red the Skeleton at the Tower of Fate, trading him skulls, one of the main collectibles. Rather than running into Chester and purchasing relics, Specter Knight must essentially do the reverse: collect the skulls, then go back to the home base to do his shopping. Much of Specter Knight is a deliberate subversion of what fans had come to expect. Players must think vertically, since Specter can wall jump and wall climb, and must always remember that his jump destroys dirt blocks, making even simple-looking platforming challenges feel dangerous. Rooms are often spacious, allowing for completely different approaches to platforming that take advantage of Specter's fast, high-flying antics. Rail grinding is one of the most satisfying parts of the game, and my only wish is that there were more of it. There's an epic boss fight that takes Specter Knight on a high-speed journey through the depths of the Tower of Fate. It is awesome, but the best part about it is the stakes. Yacht Club once again demonstrates their commitment to theme. Coolness is a top priority, but the game is still a drama. Specter of Torment might sound like a title of an Avenged Sevenfold album, but the name is not just edgy for the sake of being edgy. Specter of Torment excels in understated storytelling. From the sparse dialogue to subtle animations that convey emotion, the story of corruption and redemption told in just a few scenes at the heart of this game is deeply affecting. Shovel Knight has always featured fantastic and memorable NPCs. Specter of Torment aims to provide depth to a few in particular. One of the optional characters you can battle in every campaign is Reese, a wandering traveler. He's a spunky kid with gigantic shurikens. He doesn't have much characterization in Shovel Knight, just an enjoyable boss fight that is over pretty quickly. Reese is one of the wandering travelers, the result of the Director for a Day tier from the original Kickstarter campaign. But in Specter of Torment, Reese is given depth. He is the son of someone very important, and who owes his very life to a great sacrifice from Specter Knight himself. Observant players will notice that between levels, Specter Knight stoically gazes at a locket before players control him to move on to the next challenge. He's probably got headphones under that hood as well, looping Helena or some other emo song. You know the drill. Turns out, Specter Knight loves to disassociate and become lost in reverie just as much as the rest of us. These memories appear every few stages, and some are even playable. We eventually learn that Specter Knight used to be a man named Donovan, a master thief who longs for great power. Donovan had a partner, Luan, and the two of them traveled the world just as Shield Knight and Shovel Knight did. Luan and Donovan are lured to the Tower of Fate because they've heard a rumor about an amulet that contains power over life and death. Luan is concerned for his son, but Donovan assures him that their worries will be over once they can seize the power in the tower. And as you can imagine, things don't go well for Donovan and Luan. Upon finding the amulet, Shield Knight shows up, warning the two men that they don't know what they're up against. Luan tries to heed Shield Knight's warning, but Donovan strikes back, defeating Shield Knight, and even killing Luan in a fit of rage. It's a true tragedy. All of this would have been avoided if either party had shown up 10 minutes later. As the tower crumbles around him, Donovan strikes a bargain with the newly appeared Enchantress. She saves his life, binding him to an enchanted locket in exchange for his recruiting of the vicious Order of No Quarter. It truly feels like the deal with the devil, as you just know there's going to be some kind of twist. Specter Knight does the Enchantress's bidding, and after finishing every level, that twist arrives. The Enchantress decides that Reese, revealed to be Luan's son, will be her 8th knight. Specter rebels against this and defeats Nightmare Reese before he falls under the sway of the Enchantress. He pledges himself to her in place of Reese. The Enchantress is satisfied and lets the kid go. Now fully bound to the Enchantress, Specter Knight takes one last trip down memory lane, to a night where he and Luan are swapping stories at a campfire. Donovan promises Luan that he will lay down his life for Luan's son if the need ever arises. Donovan may have lost his humanity, but at least he kept his promise to his friend. I think it's a really well-told story. It is difficult to spin a dramatic tale in a game at the best of times. It can feel overwrought or overproduced. Here, things are pared down to the essentials, and it lands. Sometimes ambition can cost you, and it takes a huge wake-up call from those you care about the most to save you. But just because Specter of Torment has this great dramatic arc doesn't mean the game is devoid of comedy. The Tower of Fate is full of jokes. For every Order of No Quarter Knight that Specter defeats, their minions begin to show up in the tower. Some are jazzed, some are bummed out, but all of them have great dialogue and are welcomed additions to the space. Red, who you trade skulls with to gain new curioses, has his own quest to find his lost partner. But rather than ending in more death and sadness, it is instead a joyful reunion. The 80th skull you find, no matter where, is the head of Red's love, Scarlet. Reuniting the two unlocks yet another joyous and weirdly touching dance scene. It is both heartfelt and humorous, and is a great counterpoint to the edgelord's dramatics. This exquisitely animated scene, which incorporates elements of folklorico and other Latin dance styles, feels like a celebration. Specter of Torment's completion requirements are extremely rewarding. This is the only campaign where you can upgrade your sub-weapons, and doing so feels empowering, giving you more reasons to go back to stages and collect treasure. Finding all 100 skulls is similar to collecting Plague Knight's cipher coins, in that they teach you how to perform certain more complicated maneuvers with consistency, which definitely helps with the eventual speedrun. The tradition of pressing down as a fun secret useless bonus continues. Specter Knight can cross his arms and scowl, or at least I assume it's a scowl. But if you are wearing the Donovan set armor, one of the final unlockables you can earn by collecting all 100 skulls, pressing and holding down makes Specter Knight boogie down. And let me tell you, this rules. I think this is the easiest campaign in Treasure Trove to complete personally, but that doesn't mean it's lacking in depth or that the 20 feats and 23 challenges aren't satisfying to complete. I think Specter of Torment strikes a perfect balance. It's a wonderful blend of melancholy and badassery. The characters are great, and the entire adventure provides even more depth to this world. But we can't stop now, folks. There is still more to complete and enjoy. Shovel of Hope is the hero's journey and foundation of the Shovel Knight series. Plague of Shadows is the romantic one. Specter of Torment is the dramatic tragedy. So what is King of Cards? It is unabashedly, without question, the comedy. It is by far the game that deviates the most from the established Shovel Knight formula, with wild success. It is also, unexpectedly, the game that I had the hardest time completing. Every campaign has its own set of guiding design principles. For King of Cards, it's all about reinforcing glory and grandeur through art direction and, of course, movement. King Knight is this big, doofy mama's boy, and practically everything across this entire game supports that. He's large and brutish, rocking a shoulder bash that would make Wario proud, but still has the ability to bounce on top of things like Shovel Knight does. Players are back to exploring levels from a world map, searching for secrets and collectibles, and battling bosses. But there are a few twists. Every stage in King of Cards was built from the ground up to reflect King Knight's moveset, and Yacht Club's designers made an effort to lean even harder into that Mario influence. Courses are short, usually with only a checkpoint or two, and there are even secret exits as well. This marks a shift from every other mainline Shovel Knight game, but it feels great to shake things up in kingly fashion. When I say this game is a comedy, I'm referring to the entire package. King of Cards undercuts narrative tropes and makes unexpected jokes frequently, especially if you are a Shovel Knight fan. The writing is clever, taking digs at major characters and concepts that you've come to accept from this world. King Knight has always been a bit of a joke, and it's a blast to see that idea of a joke character blown all the way out. Part of what sells the comedy is the pure commitment the devs show to the bit. What if the most self-absorbed blowhard character they made suddenly had abilities that allowed him to challenge the gods themselves? The results are frequently hysterical, but shorter levels, secret exits, and clever jokes aren't the only things that King of Cards does differently. Yacht Club again went all out, creating a game within a game called Joustus. The plot of King of Cards revolves around Joustus, a new craze sweeping the land, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Did in the early 2000s. King Knight, who is convinced that he deserves respect and a crown, is certain that if he can defeat the 3 Joustus judges, he will get the accolades that he deserves. So he sets off on his journey and has the option at certain locations to play this compact yet very dense card game. This is a turn-based CCG, very much in the style of Triple Triad from Final Fantasy VIII. So not only are you making your way through 2D platforming stages, bashing, spinning, and kinging your way to greater glory, you also have the option to stop at any Joustus house and partake in a few games of cards. This to me has been an awesome addition that made my journey of completing King of Cards on every major console an even lengthier one. For fans of Shovel Knight, Joustus might seem as though it came out of nowhere, but it's just another example of Yacht Club chasing their passion and drawing influence from unexpected places. As perhaps one of the more newer but excited Final Fantasy VIII fans out there, I deeply respect the choice to include an addictive card game that is entirely optional. But I did say that this game was the most difficult to complete, and that is entirely because of Joustus alone. Not because Joustus is not fun, it's very fun, but you've got to commit to learning it. The fundamentals of Joustus are simple, but rapidly become complicated as King of Cards progresses. The basics are, there's a 3x3 grid. You and your opponent have 3 cards, and draw additional cards from a deck you have every turn. On the board, there are gems. Players must position their cards so they cover more gems than their opponents by the time the final card is laid down on the board. But this isn't just a simple card game as War or Crazy Eights. Cards have arrow indicators and can be pushed in different directions. This is as much a game about positioning as it is about having stronger cards than your opponent. And as the campaign goes on, King Knight can collect more and more cards, fleshing out his deck. There are abilities that can shove your enemy's cards further away, allowing you to place cards in the graveyard zone, moving around the grid, and even flipping enemy cards to acquire them for your team. As time goes on, the normal 3x3 grid can change entirely, and you have to play in a totally different arena. And sometimes, there are even stage hazards. Unlike Final Fantasy VIII, where you can challenge literally anyone to triple triad at the drop of a gunblade, Joustus is only available to play in specific locations with specific people. Joustus houses and on King Knight's airship, where NPCs and defeated Order of No Quarter Knights hang out. Yacht Club didn't want players to feel forced to engage in Joustus if they did not vibe with it at all. For me, I wanted to vibe with it, so I relied on a little help from my friends, the amazing Shovel Knight speedrunning community. In my line of work, we are nothing without our communities, and this is especially true when it comes to the indie game world. Yacht Club Games has built a passionate fan base over the years. Just take a look at how quickly their upcoming game Mina the Hollower's crowdfunding goals were met and then smashed. So, I turned to the speedrunning community to see if anyone can help me get a handle on Joustus, and they totally delivered. I want to give a quick shout out to the Shovel Knight speedrunning community who really helped me understand, process, and get good not only at the base games all the way across the board, but even Joustus. Shoutouts to Norcus, Magic Madman, David TKI, Mumu Akai, and Troy of Athens. Because of their support, I was able to overcome all of these obstacles with great ease. And honestly, it was really cool learning how to do all these speedrunning tricks, as well as just learning Joustus overall. It is very humbling to ask for help, but I've learned through setbacks and heartbreak that it is better to seek out a little guidance than to smash your head against a wall until things click into place. That's how it went with Joustus. I went from being confused and discouraged that I didn't understand Joustus to becoming a Joustus king. It is an incredibly empowering feeling to look at the Joustus board now and feel like I'm seeing the Matrix, no matter what cards are there. And it's a good thing that I had some help mastering Joustus, because even though you never actually have to engage with it to beat King of Cards, completing it is another story. Out of the 20 feats for King Knight, 7 of them are Joustus related, and I just had to have a complete set of all 148 Joustus cards. This is where things get tricky. There are many unique Joustus cards that can only be won from specific characters at specific times during a match. It's completely viable to build a deck of common cards purchased from Chester or won from low-level opponents. But if you want rare character cards like Scarlet's card or the Black Knight, you must defeat your opponent when that card is on the field, so then you can claim it upon victory. There is sort of a parallel play aspect of King of Cards that is very enjoyable. If you want to spend an hour mastering Joustus on the airship, you can, but if you want to blitz through every map, that's available to you as well. In-game, you never actually face the Joustus judges in a card match. Instead, King Knight beats the crap out of them in combat, and everyone thinks you've won by your wits instead of your muscles. For Completionists, committing to Joustus leads to an unbelievably satisfying boss encounter. Once you've defeated every single Joustus champion, you can challenge Cardia in a Joustus battle for the ages. After defeating Cardia, she declares that King Knight is the one she's been searching for, the hero of the ancients. She implores King Knight to come with her to her home planet or dimension, or whatever the hell it is, but King Knight is completely uninterested. The then frustrated Cardia transforms into Gigacardia in what is one of the most chaotic and crazy battles in the entire Trove. Gigacardia is difficult, but after defeating her, you earn a useful bonus, the Card Crystal. It lets you see what Joustus cards you are still missing in your deck, and which characters are holding on to them still. Gigacardia is a fantastic secret boss fight, but battling the Enchantress and the Grand Triumvirate is the end of King Knight's story. Once this gigantic Robo-King Sigma asshole is defeated, it seems like all the Enchantress's plans are foiled. The crew of the airship is happy, and it seems like peace is at hand. That is, until the final shocking twist. If you've played any of the games at this point, you would know that King Knight's game is a prequel, which means he's not actually a king of anything yet. He's not the king of Pridemore. In this final moment, King Knight ends up joining the Enchantress after all. It's darkly funny, just when it seems like the realm can be saved, and he probably himself could become a king because of this. King Knight turns his back on everyone he loves, including his own mother, and joins the Order of No Quarter. It's a little heartbreaking, but as this is a prequel, we knew it could only end one way. King Knight, on his throne, turning his back on the only people who ever loved him. But there's one final joke to be played here. Once King Knight finally sits down on the top of the world, enjoying everything he's accomplished, Shovel Knight hops into frame and the game ends, implying that the fight from the Shovel Knight campaign is where King Knight's story kind of ends. King Knight tasted glory for a fleeting moment, only to lose it all once again. The King of Cards campaign is short, but building up a full Joustus deck to earn the card Completionist feat on all 3 platforms can take you a really long time. The rest of the 20 feats are fairly manageable, and the 27 challenges are pushovers. Finding all 135 merit medals is actually easier than finding cipher coins or skulls, and you get a wonderful reward in the form of a golden statue once you collect them all. There's also one other secret completion bonus. If you have the maximum amount of gold on your person, King Knight turns gold. Stay rich, kids. Comedy is tough at the best of times, but King of Cards manages to be funny for its entire runtime. Completing it can be tough and time-consuming, but doing so is very rewarding, like sitting down on a throne that you've rightfully earned, even for a little bit. But speaking of comedy, when King of Cards was released, a whole other ass game came out called Shovel Knight Showdown, and it's exactly as it sounds. And what better way to show people that you care about the whole entire team than to beat the crap out of each other in a platform fighter? When Yacht Club Games made it a stretch goal to add some kind of multiplayer into Shovel Knight outside of local co-op, it seemed as though it might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. But no, they delivered a surprisingly substantial party game in the form of Shovel Knight Showdown. In Showdown, almost every single major character in Treasure Trove is a playable fighter. There are a staggering 20 characters to choose from, once you unlock them all, that is. It isn't just Shovel Knight and the Order. You can finally step into the shoes of the Phantom Striker, or Black Knight, or even Baz and Mona. The amount of work that went into making each fighter feel unique is tremendous, and it is very obvious. Even if Showdown doesn't quite resonate with me on the same level as, let's say, Shovel of Hope, there is no doubt that Yacht Club deserves respect for fully delivering on this battle mode. Showdown released alongside King of Cards, and with that, the Kickstarter campaign was finally complete. This journey took nearly an entire decade, but it is impossible to argue that the results were not worth it. There is no reason that Yacht Club Games needed to give Showdown its own set of achievements and feats to complete. The game is fun on its own, but it's as if they couldn't help themselves. They create a project, they think, what else can we add to give it a little something extra? And then they execute on that thing. The work ethic and commitment to player experience is undeniable. This entire game comes off as a flex. Completing Showdown actually takes some time though. It is a relatively pain-free affair if you've got some friends to play along with you. Pretty much every single time you achieve a feat or achievement, you unlock something meaningful, meaning the incentive for completion is absolutely through the roof, feat to feat. Though I will add, if you are online trying to look how to do all this stuff, a lot of the stuff is uncovered because the internet just kind of, walked away from Shovel Showdown. Important to note is that for completion, you have to beat the story mode with every character at least once. And at least in that one time of playing story mode, you must do so on hard mode. Fortunately, this is super easy to do if you're playing with a friend. My favorite character to play has ended up being Reese, who can easily shred bosses with his massive boomerangs. Some feats are associated with achieving certain win conditions, character-specific performances, even specific battle modes. I should say that most of these achievements can be achieved in a matter of literal minutes. The single-player campaign makes Showdown's stay feel a little bit long. especially when you factor in the minigame that exists in the single player mode, also has an achievement. If you don't care about earning that last on-screen medal on the main menu, you can always just boot up the game and let the timer run. Now, this doesn't give you the achievements permanently in that way, but it does unlock all the content in the game, similar to a certain Super Smash Bros. With that said, outside of the single player campaigns, I didn't really find myself wanting to ask pals to come over and play the game with me, considering at this time there is no online multiplayer or even a tournament system to encourage players to test their mettle. A game of this size would require a huge level of balance and respect that would also require a very healthy player base, and that only works if there is online play. I kind of wish that each platform version of Showdown also had the unique characters to use. Can you imagine if Kratos was in another platform fighter? But I understand that Showdown was more of a last hurrah than anything. As its own fully fledged game with 56 feats, Showdown is the cherry on top of that delicious treasure trove sundae. It feels like a celebration, and that's great because this entire video is a celebration of my love of Shovel Knight. So, I want to refocus the end of this video a little bit. I want to take you back to when my mom died. Those first few months after I lost my mom, I was depressed. Almost a year later, Shovel Knight came out. I played Shovel Knight non-stop and came out of it on the other side with a kick-ass video and an appreciation of Yacht Club games and all of what they've done. But truthfully, I never would have made it through were it not for the support of my friends, my family, my fans, and my team. We are truly nothing without the people who support us. Surrounding yourself with people who love you is the only way to survive grief. It may have taken me a long time to realize it, but I love and appreciate each and every person who has supported me over the years and helped me through some incredibly tough times. And this is where the phrase save her really comes into play here. At first, I had realized that my obsession of Shovel Knight came from the longing of overcoming the never-ending cascade of my mom's illness. I had lived 15 years of my life trying to help my mom feel as comfortable as possible as I saw her dementia get worse. Save her to me became the phrase that I had been chasing, as I was literally trying to save her, especially in her last few months. But the more I played Shovel Knight, the more I realized that I was the one needing to be saved. By my loved ones, by those closest to me, I was the one who needed them most when I didn't expect it, and it helped a lot. It gave me the strength to continue from day to day. And once I got over that hump, the reality started to settle in. The only one who could save me from my grief was myself. By saying goodbye to my mom, by letting my friends and loved ones help me, only then was I able to really realize that if I want to get back on that creative saddle, I would have had to have been the one that pushes myself above and beyond to bring me back to life. And that's where all of you and New Game Plus comes into play. As this journey winds down, I wanted to commemorate and honor the loved ones around me who helped me get here. That includes my community, my friends, my loved ones and family, but also Yacht Club games. So you all remember that I got this ephemeral tattoo from Indieland, right? Well, I have been sitting on a little secret for just this video for the last year or so. In honor of Shovel Knight and the end of New Game Plus, and my parents are going to see this and get very mad, I got my first ever permanent tattoo. Designed by Sandy Gordon, one of Yacht Club Games' finest designers. This tattoo incorporates something from every single Yacht Club game thus far, and even some that haven't even been announced yet. The final product is absolutely stunning, and I have a couple of people to thank for helping it all come true. Shoutouts to Endry at the Honorable Society Tattoo Parlor, a true artist who made this 7-hour process go as smoothly as it could. His socials are linked in the description box down below, and I'm sure he's got photos ready for you all to look at. Of course, a big thank you to superstar producer Michael Barity for capturing footage at PAX at the Yacht Club Games booth and bringing me food from IHOP while I was getting the tattoo. I want to give a big, loving, supportive thank you to Waz, Sandy, Sean, David, Ian, Celia, Shannon, Alec, Bridget, and everyone at Yacht Club Games for being true friends to me over the years and for helping me understand the games industry better. To any and all people out there who have played Shovel Knight and have supported these developers all these years. This video was designed not just from a love and passion for myself, but as a love letter to everyone out there who has ever thought about playing Shovel Knight. Now look, I didn't get this tattoo because I thought it would look cool, though it is a nice bonus. We meticulously crafted this to be exactly what I dreamed it to be. I recommend only getting something permanently etched onto your body if it truly means something to you. When I first envisioned this tattoo, I thought that Save Her would serve as a tribute to both my mom and to the game that carried me through one of the hardest times of my life. But thinking about it now, Save Her became something else over time. It became emblematic of me, not just trying different ways to save my mom and keep the positive memory of her alive. Save Her came to be a metaphor for the 15 years of my goddamn life when she was sick. But I think that's what's beautiful about all of this, right? It's a symbol, not just a reference to a piece of art that I love, but it's also a reminder that no matter what, I have a group and a support system of people who have saved me too. Save Her isn't just a phrase that scares me anymore. Instead, it's a rallying cry. For anyone feeling lost, know that you can find hope anywhere, even if that shovel of hope is just in a game. Completing Shovel Knight, completing every aspect of the treasure trove across as many systems as I can manage, is something that I love doing. Spreading the gospel of chivalry to anyone who will listen has become one of my absolute favorite parts of my career of late. Over the years, I've been fortunate enough to make some really incredible friends in the games industry. But I never would have expected for that to happen with the makers of my favorite indie game. To everyone at Yacht Club Games, this video is for you. Cheers to all of you. You have restored my confidence in ways that I never knew I needed. Thank you for helping to save me. So, with that in mind, guys, I give the Shovel Knight Treasure Trove its Completionist rating of completed. And with that said, one more game remains for New Game Plus. It's time to officially say goodbye to New Game Plus, goodbye to my mother, and more importantly, goodbye with Mother 3. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all very soon.